Hey there, Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. And if you are new here, my name is Hannah. I'm a Western Practical Astrologer. All right, so we're here today to talk about this very exciting transit, Pluto in Capricorn. More specifically, we are going to be exploring the current times of Pluto in Capricorn. Now, Pluto does turn direct in this sign on the 11th of October, so that is why that date is shown. And so, what we're going to do today is we're just going to discuss this 29th degree energy. Just before we do get into this video, however, please, if you do like the video, make sure to give it a like, and as well, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you would like to book a reading with me, you can visit my website, hannahselsewhere.com. There you can also find all of my astrology products. Okay, so it's the final countdown, folks. It's the final countdown. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. Yes, so we see here that Pluto turns direct on the 11th of October in Capricorn at 29 degrees, and then will be direct in this sign up until the 19th of November. And then from there, Pluto will re-enter Aquarius, where it will begin its 20-year transit. So it really is a time of endings, everybody. It's a time to say goodbye, right? It's not a case of see you later, right? With the Pluto dance that has been happening, but it's about saying goodbye. Because the thing about this is Pluto will not be in Capricorn again for another 200 years or so. So that's a very long time. And the other thing I just want to say, I do recognize, and I hope you can also remember, that Pluto was in Aquarius from about January of this year. And then, of course, it did re-enter Capricorn from the 1st of September. So we got a flavor, we got a taste for what Pluto in Aquarius has to offer us as a collective. But then there was also that tiny little dip in 2023. So that was more toward the beginning of the year as well. So with that, remember that Pluto in Aquarius has been providing some teasers of what could very well come for you, come up for you, especially if you have significant planets in the sign of Aquarius. Maybe your sun's there, maybe it's even at 1 degree or something like that. In my case, Saturn is in Aquarius at 10 degrees, so that's a little bit later on, but I would also argue that there was some kind of influence as well because of just that sphere of influence. Now Pluto, Saturn orbs, I guess you could say, should be a bit smaller than that to really feel anything. But then again, I also want to think about how Chiron is a part of it. So basically, all of this is to say, we do want to think about the bigger picture. Okay, always remember the bigger picture. Remember personal planets, placements you have going on in your chart. Could even be a case of you have significant placements in Taurus, and so there's that square influence, or maybe in Scorpio, another square influence there. So it could be maybe Mercury in Taurus or Scorpio as an example. But to focus in on Pluto and Capricorn, the 29th degree, this is a degree of urgency. It's an anaretic degree. It's a degree where we can sense, we can feel this push, we can feel this even, do you know what? Whenever I look back in retrospect, it's that, it's that kind of energy. Even with Pluto being retrograde, especially, right? It has been retrograde in Capricorn at 29 degrees since the 1st of September. So from the 1st of September to the 11th of October, with that, it's especially potent in terms of this retrospective energy. Just sort of looking back, considering what we've built, what has changed, how have we transformed, what have we outgrown within our Capricorn house, and considering too, what might you be saying goodbye to? Truly, what might you be saying goodbye to? Because here's the thing, when Pluto does station to turn direct from the 11th of October, and then there's that month period of Pluto being in Capricorn at 29 degrees, that is a good opportunity for us to actually move forward with the things that we want to let go of, the things that we are saying goodbye to. And kind of think of it as, you're packing your bags, you're packing your bags for your trip, for your next era as Pluto re-enters Aquarius for its 20-year transit. Think then about what you're going to be packing. Which kinds of things are you going to bring with you? What clothes, which outfits, which necessities? Thinking about toiletries there. What are you going to be packing in that suitcase, so to speak? Of course, I'm just kind of drawing more from a vision here just to get you to imagine. But truly, the thing about it too is it can be hard. It can be. I sort of visualize saying goodbye to a family member, a friend, a partner, and the whole thing that I'm wanting to communicate from this is just imagine yourself going on a trip, and maybe that trip is very, very long, and saying goodbye even to a spouse or a family member. Remember the feelings that can come with that, right? You're at the airport and you're saying goodbye maybe to your parents because you're going to study abroad somewhere, or because you're going to work abroad somewhere. These are the feelings feelings that I'm trying to convey, and maybe you can relate in some way. So what we are going to do now is we're going to go through your horoscopes, and I'll just show you. I'll explain firstly. I'll explain. The way we're going to do this is with Pluto being at 29 degrees, the anorenic degree. Remember that Saturn has been the dispositor of Pluto for the past 16 years. So just to explain here, Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. Do keep in mind the back and forth there between Pluto in Aquarius and Capricorn, but essentially, yes, it has been 16 years. So with Saturn being the dispositor, Saturn has actually made its way through about 6 signs or so, whilst Pluto has been in Capricorn. And one of those signs was Capricorn, ushering in a whole new cycle. There was that conjunction between Saturn and Pluto, and that was around about January 2020, so about 4.5 years ago. And so with that then, that ushered in a whole new cycle, about 33 years. I've put 33 years, but it can be a bit more or a bit less, just depending on the transits. It really can depend, but I've just put it at 33 on average. So yes, Saturn was in Capricorn at that time and created that conjunction with Pluto. So we're gonna get into this today, and with that, I just want to explain Saturn. Saturn is strongly about maturity and time, wisdom, lessons. It's about responsibility, and it's also about integrity. Having integrity, being adult-like. We truly do come into our own whenever we explore our own Saturnian journey, hence the Saturn return stuff, right? I mean, you could have actually experienced your Saturn return throughout all of this, just making it even more profound, perhaps. But what we're going to do is we're going to explore Saturn through those signs in combination with Pluto to kind of get a sense of what have you really been focusing on these past 16 years? What have you really been building? And what have you also been addressing within yourself in terms of shedding, releasing, letting go, any fears, any shadow stuff, unconscious stuff? Because remember, Pluto is so much about this. Pluto is about facing our shadow. So, on that note, we are going to get into your signs. Okay, so horoscopes for each of the signs. First up, then, we have Aries. So, Aries, Pluto has been transiting your 10th house for the past 16 years. So, we want to think about how you have been largely transforming when it comes to things like career, success, achievement, accomplishment, your reputation. You have been gaining inner strength, and you have also been very resilient when it comes to these areas. Perhaps also you have addressed fears and certain limitations and blockages with respect to these areas too. And perhaps you have outgrown sort of outdated versions of yourself and how those versions just no longer align with a potential career path or a sense of purpose, a sense of integrity and dignity, respect. Having self-respect, respect for yourself there. And maybe too, a big part of this is you recognizing your personal power throughout. Your personal power, your courage, your stamina, your endurance. But let's take you back to the beginning. Let's think about 2008, 2010, around that time period. Saturn was in Virgo in your 6th house. So what could have really been ushered in for you when Pluto had first entered Capricorn was this feeling of, okay, what would I like to get better at, improve at, refining your skills? Maybe there was a lot to do with work and your services and really having to perform excellently. I mean, I'm talking about a class service. I'm talking about going above and beyond within work. And then come 2010 to 2012, well, Saturn was in your 7th. And so it could very well be that many of you tied the knot around that time, right? You got married, you took things to the next level. Maybe you started your own business, or you committed to a certain partnership, right? And that could have been naturally business related, or maybe it's that you tied in with a certain contract, right? You signed a certain contract or an agreement which essentially tied you to a certain person or project or item. Then we move on to 2012 to 2015, and with Saturn being in your 8th house, well, that transit could have brought loss. It could have brought sadness and pain and a lot of suffering, quite honestly, which, in all fairness, could very well have challenged the ways in which you showed up, right? The ways in which you showed up within your career. Consider even how Pluto then would have been one of the dispositors of Saturn. There would have actually been a bit of a a mutual reception happening there. So yes, that period really could have been a case of addressing a lot of unconscious stuff and being challenged by loss and grief. But hey, it could have also been a case of you committing to a certain shared resource plan there and then building from there. Then we move on to 2015 to 2018. Saturn was in your ninth. So that transit, I think, could have been a case of you really committing to a certain higher education plan or structure, following a guide, following some sort of program. Maybe mentorship was a big part of it, or it's that your self-belief or your deeply held beliefs were tested in some way. But there was growth, there was integrity, I think, that came up, and maybe even your religious principles and morals, things like this, came up a lot too. And so there was this sense of direction. Then we go to 2018 to 2020. And that then was a period of, okay, really, your potential career path or your ideals about success, these things shifting and changing within you. And maybe things being brought to light, okay? Things being brought to light, having to face a professional situation head on and to really see it for what it was. And then the thing about it too is possible power struggles could have came up within work situations. Now, that particular time period brought with it this new cycle. So January 2020, we saw for you Saturn and Pluto creating that conjunction in your 10th. So it ushered in a new 33-year cycle. And that cycle has something to say about your purpose, about your life's work, and how such matters then really challenged you and got you thinking on a deeper level. What do I want with my life? What am I building? What have I outgrown? Which kinds of professional relationships don't serve me anymore? In which ways might I be self-sabotaging or getting in my own way? And so do keep in mind that this is a cycle that will continue to sort of unfold and progress as time goes on. But then we move into 2020 to 2023, and Saturn was in the 11th house for you. So that time period could have brought with it more of this energy of, okay, what about my communities? What about teams and groups I'm a part of? My friendships? Where do I feel like I belong? What am I building within these communities and teams? How do I wish to really leave my mark here? Or to share my unique perspectives, thinking about even potential unconventional views or just you thinking outside of the box. But it's also about that self-respect. So to respectfully share, but to also be in relation, connection, to relate to other people, basically, to join together with others. I think these themes really came up for you. So where are we now? Well, we are now at a stage where Saturn is in your 12th. And whilst all of these other areas, right, we explored these other areas through the houses, whilst your trajectory over these past 16 years have been really about your career and your professional lives and so, where you stand within society, right? Your social status or your reputation. Well, Saturn now and from 2023 has acted as a, a player of great solitude, great spiritual insight, really going within, paying attention to your intuition, trying to make sense of, okay, where do I go from here? What do I want from this stuff, right? Really, what about my direction? What about my path? What have I learned? Who have I outgrown? Which way forward now? And I want you to remember that Saturn will enter your sign, your sign 2025. So we're going to see for you the building and the structuring, the foundational stuff, right? We think about establishing a foundation. When it comes to your aims and your goals and your life path, this could be a whole new sense of freedom and adventure. Time to explore the new, Aries. And now, before we move on, just remember that Saturn will dip back into Pisces throughout 2025. So still stay with that. That's okay. Stay with that. That could be a good opportunity for you to go, right, okay, Saturn's in Aries for a bit of 2025. I can see, right, what I would like to build, how I would like to redirect my life. Great. Then that transition of Saturn back into Pisces will give you an opportunity to contemplate, right? To go, oh, okay, how does this feel? How does this feel? That's a big, big important factor, I think. The reason why this is, I think, is because Aries, let me just say this, you are a sign who is so in tune with your gut. Oh, you're very intuitive. Your body, right? Your body holds the score here. And it communicates so much to you about your survival, about your path, about staying away from danger. So keep in mind that that part of the transit can give you an opportunity just to mull things over a little bit, right? But basically, in a nutshell here, Aries, oh, you have really grown and matured. My goodness, you have grown and matured greatly when it comes to your purpose and just how much you're going to be even known known for your transformations, known for your wisdom and your insights. Let's now move on to Taurus. Taurus, what has been happening for you since the beginning of this transit from 2008? Well, with Pluto being in the ninth house for you, you have been really growing in your truth, growing in your studies, and how you share your opinions, your views, your wisdom with the world. I see this as many Taurus outgrowing outdated versions of reality, of other people's expectations and other people's views and dogma, and you actually coming to these points of renewal and refusing to budge, essentially, when it comes to standing up for what is true in your eyes. And there's also a part of this, I feel, that says you have been growing in terms of your higher education, learning more, expanding your mind, expanding your horizons. See, This is about you being able to think for yourself, to see how things show up practically and physically and realistically, and just being quite protective actually about that. Just not letting others really interfere with your process. And, maybe even a part of it is travel. The ways in which you want to, or have been, should I say, the ways in which you have been growing when it comes to, okay, sure, broadcasting, publishing, possibly teaching, mentoring, but then also traveling. And by this, I mean, it could be a case of you traveling for work. It could be a case of you setting up shop in a different country or some sort of business in a whole different country. It could also be an online situation, right? Where you are able then to reach people from all across the world, all across the globe, which is quite exciting, really, because I mean, thanks to technology, we can do that. So I think that this is certainly a transit where, you can give appreciation, you can give thanks. Maybe you even reflect a great deal for this final month of Pluto being in Capricorn. You reflect upon, wow, if it wasn't for social media or if it wasn't for this kind of technology, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. That's so exciting. I'm grateful for that. Or it could be a case of, I'm so, so thankful that I've been able to meet such amazing people and to share my message, and people want to listen to me, and we can be in connection with each other, community with each other, right? So I think there's just this feeling of gratitude, I think, with Pluto in the ninth. And even that gratitude could extend to the kinds of things that you've outgrown, right? The kinds of belief systems that you've outgrown. You could have entered Pluto in Capricorn believing in a certain philosophy or religion or faith or a worldview. And now you're actually coming to a place of, I don't think that anymore. I've changed so much. And hey, that's the thing with Pluto being in Capricorn, it has been such a long transit. So I'm sure you have changed in 16 years. I am sure. But let's take you back though. Let's think about what happened at the beginning of this transit, right? So 2008 to 2010, Saturn was in your fifth house. For some Taurus, this could have been a romantic relationship that began and it developed into something that was more long term and it was more committed. This could have been a certain hobby or a project that you started, a creative endeavor that you started back then, and that's stuck, right? It's stuck. Even when I think about your very sign, Taurus, you can be this sign that says, right, I'm gonna hold on to this. I need to support myself here. And there is that determination on your part. Another possibility, though, hey, could very well be children. Whether this be the intention to have children later on in life and then to create security to support your children, or this could have been a case of you actually having a child, right? You having a child around that time period. And this is the thing I just want to say. Do remember that as I go through Saturn, through these signs, they're linked. There's a connection there with your worldviews and your beliefs and broadcasting and teaching and higher education, all of that stuff. There are linkages between the two. So whenever we fast forward to 2010 to 2012, Saturn was in your sixth. So that time period could have brought with it this sort of get to work influence, okay? Maybe it is that you stuck at something. You really thought, hey, you know what? I need to be able to create a consistent routine. I need to make sure that I've got things in order, that my day-to-day tasks are done, my responsibilities are attended to. Maybe a part of that involved other people, or you even trying to establish greater harmony and balance throughout your day. Then we move on to 2012 to 2015, and Saturn was in the seventh. So that part of this transit could have invited this, okay, we're in this for the long haul. Whether this be getting married, committing to a spouse or a partner, should I say, whether this be you even entering a contract, some sort of work contract, a business contract, a deal there that was made, some sort of agreement. Or this could have been you really getting a hold of your finances back then and thinking to yourself, right, I know this is tough. I know that I'm being challenged right now, but I have this debt to pay off and I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to do this. So there was ah, that fierce determination with Saturn and Scorpio. It's that sort of energy. And you may have also found that your relationships transformed a great deal. It could have been your attitudes towards relationships. It could have even been that a breakup or a separation led to a different sort of outlook toward relationships. So those are just possibilities. Then we move on to 2015 to 2018, and Saturn was in the eighth. That transit could have really brought up a lot to do with vulnerability and intimacy and any blockages there. And the way I kind of see this is you recognizing times when you run away from vulnerability and intimacy and getting close. Or it could have been a case of you not realizing just how much you were overdoing it or overextending yourself. And so Saturn acted as this limiting force, but with love, right? We think about discipline with Saturn, for example. So maybe you having to a hold of get a hold of some sort of over exaggeration, or to address any too over the top attitudes there. And because of that, you could have very well have established more of this I am disciplined attitude. I can control myself. I have the wisdom, I have the knowledge now. Then we move on to 2018 to 2020. Saturn was in your ninth. So that time period was really the kicker, I think, in terms of this wake up call, this revelation, this, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been, looking at it this way. Actually, I'm going to try to look at it a different way. And to maybe even reestablished yourself in terms of maturity and being quite wise about your purpose and about the messages that you wanted to convey to the world there. Security could have also been a big, big part of these shifts for you. Plus, there was that new cycle that began January 2020. So Pluto and Saturn were conjunct in Capricorn, and that was January 2020, ushering in a new 33-year cycle or so regarding these sort of renewals to do with things like your beliefs, your higher education, things like your worldviews, maybe even legal stuff came up, a lot of legal issues, thinking about, oh, well, I never thought of this legal matter before, better address that, better get right with that so that I don't have to go back there again. This is the thing, even about both Saturn and Pluto, they can be highly, highly karmic. So, just what I mean by that is recognizing that yes, there are consequences to our actions. So, maybe when we think about exploring the law, legal stuff, you did have this sort of wake up call, and that was enough for you to go, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to deal with that anymore. Okay. And maybe even this could have been a case of you observing such legal issues happening outside of yourself, and then you going, okay, I'm going to learn from that. So then we move on to 2020 to 2023, and Saturn was in your 10th. That, of course, was a bit more recent. So from that period, we notice how you were really starting to build and to bring form to your innovations and your unique views, your unique ideals, and forming some kind of community or this group dynamic within a professional setting. Or maybe this was a case of you entering into an organization or a company or a firm, and you could recognize what needed to change, what differences needed to be made. And so you committed yourself, you showed dedication there. But now, where we're at for you, Taurus, is Pisces, right? So Saturn is now in the 11th for you, and there have been a few blockages and limitations that you have been addressing to do with friendships and communities and teams. And maybe a big part of it, though, is empathy, compassion, emotional truth, emotional honesty. Emotional endurance could also show up here too. Maybe even you're coming to terms with the quality, right? The actual quality of friendships, for instance, or to feel like you really have a purpose within a club or a group that you're a part of. And maybe also you're having to set healthy boundaries within group situations so that you feel a bit more safe and secure. Moving on to Gemini. All right, Gemini. So, Gemini, the past 16 years. Ouch. Ouch. A lot of loss, possibly grief with that. And hey, grief, loss could be about not just loved ones and close relatives physically leaving this earthly plane, but it could also be about certain breakups, divorces, separations, careers, right? Career paths, financial positions, just those endings, right? Those endings. And with such endings comes, you could say pain, you could say sadness, emotion. But I think what this also indicates is you perhaps learning a thing or two from those losses and what those losses have shed light on for you in terms of, what truly matters in life, who truly matters, the path you're on, the life you lead. What's it all for? What's the meaning of it? What's the value of it? So, a lot to do with inner exploration, I think. So much to do with exploring your own psyche and why you do the things you do. Could be that many Gemini, you have taken up counseling, therapy, psychotherapy there. Or maybe it's that you find certain tools, such as astrology, for instance. Astrology is a tool to help you look deeper into yourself. And I'm sure there are other methods, there are other tools out there as a way to do that. And maybe another possibility here is you addressing your own traumas, your own past, your past. What happened throughout your younger years? Why do you think you do the things you do today? What do you think influenced you in a way? How did your relationships shape you? So a lot of family stuff, I think. And if it is that there's anything unresolved within you, Gemini, maybe with Pluto and Capricorn, you have been feeling this sense of urgency, this, especially with the 29 degrees, actually, I would say, so that's quite recent, but the sense of urgency to go, hold on, why am I like this? I want to change for the better. I don't want to be limited here. I don't want to be blocked in this way anymore. I want control over my life. And I don't want these things from the past to consume me anymore. And another possibility then is, my goodness, how much you have taken responsibility for any debts, any repayments that you've had to make there. We go back to the whole karmic stuff to do with Pluto and Saturn. But yes, I mean, maybe you look back and you think, wow, I've really improved when it comes to debt. Or I've really gotten a hold of my own impulses, right? How compulsive perhaps you can be when it comes to certain things. So exploring your compulsions, exploring your impulses, and maybe as well the ability to explore the self-sabotage, any self-destructive tendencies. Yes, Gemini, I see this as you growing so much, so profoundly. And there's magnetism with this. There is attraction with this. Drawing new kinds of people to you, new opportunities to you, feeling this accomplishment with it all, right? So let's take you back. Let's take you back. When Saturn was in Virgo, this was around 2008 to 2010. Of course, Saturn was in Virgo for a bit longer there, I just want to say, but we're just going from the beginning of Pluto in Capricorn. Fourth house energy. Whoa. So you entered this transit, maybe feeling like you were blocked or limited when it came to family relations, family members. Maybe you felt this sense of commitment or responsibility to do with your own living situation. This could have been a case of you wanting to buy a home, get a mortgage, or it could have been more so about just your security. Maybe moving out of your family home at the time, moving out of a relationship situation at the time, and essentially really considering your own emotional needs there. Then we move on to Saturn being in Libra in the fifth. So that time period, I think, could have brought with it perhaps a new kind of love, right? The start of a new relationship, a new committed relationship, especially in Libra. It could have also brought with it this desire to want to have a family or to have a child, or just thoughts about children, and maybe thinking to yourself, well, if I am to have a child, I need to make sure that the person I'm with is right for me and we're a good match. On another note, this could have been a case of you taking on some sort of creative project or getting in touch with a hobby and really going for it, actually, Gemini. Feeling, oh, I'm excited, I'm inspired. I want to find people who I can connect with about this hobby. But with Saturn, of course, it was so much about mastery. It was about getting really good at it, at that hobby. Then we move into 2012 to 2015. Saturn was in Scorpio in the 6th house. So that transit, I'm just going to say here, that transit could have actually been quite challenging for you. Okay? Because when we think about it this way, Saturn does rule your 8th house, right? So I wonder, was there some sort of loss throughout that period? Could have been the loss of a pet, a close pet there. It could have been the loss of an employment situation, an employment matter coming to an end. Or it could have been that certain routines felt very extreme and just like a lot. Maybe those years brought with them so much work. Oh, so much work, so much dedication. Maybe it even is that you reached a bit of a burnout, or you realized what your priorities really were and you had to realign yourself. You had to readjust and kind of go, hold on a second, this isn't working. Why am I doing this? I'm running myself into the ground. Could have also been a health scare, a health situation that came up and put things into perspective for you, Gemini. Then we move on to 2015 to 2018, and what we saw there with Saturn in the 7th was, well, potentially you making a commitment within a relationship. So long-term relationships, being a bit more about, okay, this is about taking things to the next level. Or it could have also been a case of you really coming to terms with responsibility and maturity within partnerships and relationships. Perhaps it was even a business matter. Maybe such relationships and partnerships involved travel. You could have very well have been abroad within a committed relationship there. Or you moved to a different country or destination to be with someone. Again, this stuff could be about business, could be about work and partnerships. But on another note, it could have also been a case of you having to really face responsibility with Saturn opposing you at the time. Okay, need to bring structure here, need to bring form here, need to be responsible here, need to get my stuff together. And here, this is the thing about it. Doing so because you knew that by putting in the work, you would have more freedom after. Then we move on to 2018 to 2020, and Saturn was in your 8th house. So that particular period brought with it, such insights about responsibility, about integrity, about respect. Do you respect yourself? How much do you respect yourself? What are you willing to tolerate? What kinds of boundaries are you going to put in place there? But at the same time, in which ways did they transform? Did they go through renewals? Major life transitions actually could have happened for you, Gemini, back then. You could have had a child, right? You could have had a child during that time. Or maybe it's that you got a house or you got married, right? Just when it comes to the 8th house, it could be just major life transitions in general. It could have even been a bit of a a scare, like the thought of losing a loved one, for example, that could have been quite challenging for you. And at the same time, I do want to say that it could have brought about such a psychological insight, many psychological insights, just looking deeper into yourself and trying to understand, okay, how am I limiting myself? How am I blocking myself? What do I fear? What is on the other side of this fear? Plus, of Saturn invited a new cycle. So Saturn and Pluto were conjunct January 2020, ushering in a new 33-year cycle to do with this stuff. So I think that basically there's more of the self-explorative inner workings. These areas are still going to unfold, and many more truths and insights about why you do the things you do. These things are going to just continue to grow and to come out of you, so to speak. Revelation after revelation, like, wow, okay. And then with that, so much growth and maturity and wisdom. Healing too, a lot of healing. Fast forward to 2020 to 2023, we had Saturn in your ninth. So that part of Saturn invited more of this structure and this responsibility and this sense of integrity to do with broadcasting, publishing, teaching, mentoring, getting your message out there, making sure that you have all the legal stuff in order, and considering any travel plans and really making sure that you plan for those well. And maybe those travel plans involved community, togetherness, really just coming together with like-minded people. Then we come to the 10th house. Currently, you are focusing on, okay, what about my purpose? What do I really want my life to look like? Where am I headed? And how can I be somewhat fluid and flexible about that and try to not judge myself? How can I let go of certain limiting beliefs about myself here to do with my career, to do with my professional life? Successes are a big part of it, but it's also about your very, like the very meaning of success, basically, the very meaning of it. And perhaps trying to come at things from a place of greater compassion and even being really caring toward others and being generous and giving and thinking about your fellow man. With that Pisces influence, maybe a big part of this transit is, how can I serve others? How can I show compassion and empathy? And maybe even recognizing how certain professional matters don't align with those values or those morals for you, and what needs to fade away then in this regard. But do keep in mind that the trajectory you've been going on, that you've been following these past 16 years, have really been about your own inner discoveries and getting to know yourself more so at your core, and to come to terms with anything that is limiting or is confining, and to also recognize just how much you have grown in your spiritual wisdom, emotional wisdom, and even to consider how you've shown responsibility and integrity when it comes to things like debt. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to Cancer. So, Cancer. let's talk about the past 16 years for you. What has been happening? Well, with Pluto being in your seventh house over these past 16 years, whew, you've really been challenged when it comes to tapping into your personal power. What has been largely reflected back at you is self respect, integrity, owning up to things, right? Taking accountability, being able to say, okay, you know what? I messed up there. I made a mistake. I was wrong. It's just to take responsibility for your own side of things. But here's the other thing. What has also been coming up is recognizing what isn't your responsibility, what doesn't belong to you, what doesn't serve you. Remembering that when it comes to partnerships and relationships, it's not just about putting all the blame on one person. It's also about seeing that each or all member or members are adding to it. And so I think perhaps the most important thing for you to do, or that you have been doing, is to recognize, okay, what am I bringing in? And if there is anything that you've been noticing that you really do not like, that you're finding hard to accept, I think Pluto here in Capricorn at this anaretic degree of urgency, it could very well be tapping on your shoulder right now and saying, do you really want to bring that into the next 20 years of your life? Is that really what you want for your future? And so maybe a big part of this is it's decision making time. Trying not to sit on the fence too much. Maybe a part of Pluto and Capricorn has been about showing you how you might be sitting on the fence when it comes to partnerships and relationships. But hey, let's go another path with this. This might not necessarily be about a spouse, a partner. This could be about a business deal. This could be about a contract. This could be about an organization that you've been a part of. Perhaps it's even about some sort of attachment, like a contract, an agreement that binds you to a certain person or a business. Maybe also you're having to really sit with just how connected are we, you know? How intertwined are we? Are we too enmeshed in this? Right? There could be a lot of emotional enmeshment stuff coming up here, Cancer. And so Pluto could be acting sort of as this, okay, it's time to transform that. It's time to think about what is outdated, how you've outgrown that situation, and how you can mature, in which ways you can be more wise. Now, this could also be a case of you actually seeing how you've transformed when it comes to establishing greater trust and intimacy within your relationships. Here's what's really coming through. You and potential significant other, potential friend, even, right? Just one-on-one relationships there. You and another addressing the shadow, addressing power struggles, addressing what isn't being said, the hidden stuff, and bringing that hidden stuff to light, expressing the truth, being very open and vocal about, hey, you know what, that bugged me, that annoyed me, I think this, and this is how I feel. A lot of feelings coming up here. And so for certain Cancerians out there, it could be a case of you actually really transforming when it comes to partnerships and relationships over these past 16 years. You owning your part, basically. You can't make your significant other own their stuff. But I can't help but feel as if certain partners for Cancerians out there have been owning their stuff. They have been transforming. They have been going through these renewals, these maturity renewals, these responsibility renewals. And so things have shifted and changed greatly when it comes to relationships for you, Cancer. Now, another way to look at this could very well be a kind of separation, a divorce, right? Things actually coming to an end, and that could actually be the best thing for you, for your situation. And so there's a kind of a letting go, but also there could be some things within that relationship that bind you together. I mean, it could be children, for example, it could be a house situation, whatever it is. But whilst it can be more of a separation, there could still be some things connecting you together. Maybe binding isn't the best word there. Maybe connecting is a better word to say. Okay. Then, whenever we think about the beginning of this transit, let's consider 2008 to 2010. So, Saturn was in your third house, Cancer. And so that could have brought up with it this responsibility feel when it came to siblings, maybe having to be the responsible sibling, or you recognizing that. Oh, and do you know what? Before we move on, just a second, I even just want to say another possibility with Pluto in the seventh. It could be a case of a potential partner or friend dying. Okay, there could have been a loss there. Right. So let's now turn our focus to the beginning. Let's go back to the start. Let's think about how Saturn was in your third house from 2008 to 2010. So at the beginning of this transit, perhaps it was that you were committing yourself to your education. You might have really been focusing in on, okay, I need to qualify, I need to pass my exams. Maybe it was that there was a great responsibility bestowed upon you with respect to your siblings, or having to be the responsible one, having to get the education, get the grades, be perfect, so to speak. And then we move on to 2010 to 2012. Saturn was in your fourth house. And so this is where we notice for you, Cancer, a lot of building and structuring and planning that went into your home life, considering the future and your security a great deal when it came to your home life. Maybe even this was a relationship situation that made you think about the long haul and made you think about possibly building with this other person, marrying this other person, committing to them. Or perhaps it was even a case of you seeing how you wanted to really progress things and take responsibility of things within the home alongside your spouse or your significant other. Maybe certain rules and regulations had to be put in place within the home in order to make it function in a more respectful way. Maybe even it was a lot to do with peace and being a bit of a mediator back then. Then we go to Saturn being in your fifth house from 2012 to 2015. And so that could have brought with it this seriousness to do with children, to do with art, creativity, your hobbies. But maybe a big part of this was quite intense and quite extreme, maybe going to extremes when it came to your art or your creativity there, or even just feeling very passionate, feeling so passionate, very much inspired, wanting to really make things happen, possibly being a bit obsessive about the whole thing, maybe finding this passion project that just took your full focus, your full attention. Another possibility, though, could be on a romantic level, you really took things to the next level. This could be then a love situation, a romantic situation that you felt very strongly about, and you were like, right, okay, that is the person for me. I want to marry them. I want to be with them for the rest of my life. Or it's that you and your romantic partner back then had a lot of stuff to address within yourselves, a lot of unconscious stuff came up to the surface. Power struggle stuff was addressed. Moving on to 2015 to 2018. So Saturn was in your 6th house back then, Cancer. Okay, well, that was certainly a time period of you going, right, okay, well, what about my commitments? What about my responsibilities and my duties? What do I need to do here? How can I commit myself? How can I take responsibility of my day-to-day, my routines, creating some sort of structure there to do with your routines and your everyday habits? Maybe even thinking about your aspirations in combination with all of this, sort of going to yourself, right, okay, well, if I put in these building blocks, then okay, I'll have more freedom at work, or I'll have more time to do X, Y, and Z. Perhaps even just looking at the ways in which you were challenged to get things in order. But that could have been quite tricky because there was a lot to do. There was just so much going on. It just felt like you can never get a minute. But then we go to 2018 to 2020, and Saturn was in your 7th. So, hey, many of you Cancerians could have gotten married throughout that time period or during that time period. Or perhaps you just took things to a more committed level with your significant other, with your partner. Perhaps it was even a case of you addressing outdated sort of ways of showing up within partnerships because, Pluto was also there in the 7th at the same time. Maybe even you got a job, right? You got a significant, substantial job that meant you could afford some sort of security, or you could commit then more to a long-term plan within your relationships. So because that security was in place through a certain job or a business deal, a business matter, you could then start to really see a future and start to build there. Another possibility, though, could very well be that for certain Cancerians, you experience some sort of restriction or setbacks with respect to relationships and partnerships back then. Okay, so there were some heavy limitations that got in your way, but maybe you also learned how to work through those things in combination with your significant other or your business partner. Moving on to 2020 to 2023, we notice here that Saturn was in your 8th house. And so that time period could have indicated, well, just going to be honest here, it could have indicated some type of loss or a potential fear of loss or a scare. Or it could have indicated some surprising or shocking grief situation, or potentially this powerless situation. You're feeling powerless, feeling like, oh, where do I go from here? Or maybe it even pointed towards some psychological distress for you, or just trying to explore, okay, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel limited? Why do I feel blocked? What am I afraid of? Just sitting with these things and potentially even reaching out for some sort of help or support. Perhaps even Saturn in this position invited some stressors, some just stress to do with other people's resources, other people's money, and perhaps needing to gain support from people within your community to help you through that. Now, before I move on to Saturn and Pisces, just to take a step back a moment, there was that new cycle that started in your 7th house. So January 2020, we saw Pluto and Saturn conjunct in Capricorn in the 7th. So that was the beginning of this new 33-year cycle or so to do with empowerment within your relationships and partnerships, to do with, okay, what have I outgrown? Which unconscious patterns and habits am I letting go of here? In which ways am I stepping into self-sabotage and self-destruction within my partnerships? How can I accept love? How can I accept help from other people, maybe? Or having to really face anything restrictive, anything holding you back then. And naturally, this is part of a much bigger process. Okay, lastly, 2023 to present, we've got Saturn in Pisces. So right now, Cancer, you are considering, okay, what about where I see myself in the next coming years? And okay, sure, you could be a Cancerian who's a bit more older, right? And you feel a bit more settled. Okay, sure. But there could be some of you who think to yourself, do I really want to live here for the rest of my life? Do I feel safe here? Do I feel secure here? Would I like to maybe move to a different country, a different location? Or maybe for some of you, you're actually waiting for certain documents to arrive or for certain verifications to be done. Security checks possibly are being performed for you with respect to travel or higher education. You know, there could be some sort of higher educational program you want to join, or a program that you want to sign up for, a course you want to sign up for, and there's just some delays happening. Maybe such matters are quite spiritual related, or they're about creativity and art. Then again, another possibility here could be about just you gaining some sort of qualifications, right? Qualifications to help you get ahead, to help you progress forward, to maybe gain more income or to gain greater social status, just as an example. Then again, with it being Pisces, there could be this feeling of it is what it is, right? We're just gonna trust that whatever will be, will be. It's this sort of energy with Pisces. And, you know, it could even be a case of with Saturn in the 9th house now that you just feel more at peace in terms of your beliefs or in terms of how you've matured, right? How your worldviews have matured, how your outlook on life has really changed over these number of years. Maybe you feel a bit more at ease, or there's greater serenity there, or maybe it's partly about acceptance, just to kind of accept that, yes, you know what, I used to think that, I used to believe that, but that doesn't align with me anymore, and so I'm moving forward. And just to say here that your trajectory over these past 16 years, Cancer, has been so much about how you see yourself through the other, right? Thinking about the shadow, exploring your unconscious, but also how you can show up in the most honorable, respectable, and dignified way within your partnerships. Next up, we have Leo. Okay, so Leo, when exploring Pluto in Capricorn for you, let's consider how over the past 16 years you have been evolving and experiencing major transitions and transformations within your working life, within your everyday life. This could be a case of you committing to particular plans in terms of routines and schedules, but then realizing that certain things needed to come to an end, maybe because you had to really be realistic with yourself, you had to be practical, or perhaps this was about being able to recognize when you can go to extremes and how you have went to extremes when it comes to your everyday lives, the mundane, the practical. Realizing, oh my goodness, my stress levels right now, they're through the roof. No, can't do that. Can't deal with that. That's not healthy for me. Or coming to terms with your productivity levels, going to extremes there. But then also, just as much here, we want to think about how with your productivity levels and with your organizational skills and with your schedules and your routines, etc., this has been quite the journey. It has been this journey of, right, okay, it's time to take responsibility. Right, okay, I see how I messed up there. I see how that was a mistake. I'm going to learn from that. Great. So actually, growing in your resilience, growing in your determination, being able to showcase strong integrity, and to also come across as, do you know what? I'm the kind of coworker, I'm the kind of colleague who is there to really lend my support, lend a helping hand, to lend my support and services, to offer, right? To offer my services. And maybe too, a part of it is just the amount of learning that has had to go into your work and your services, reinventing yourself time and time again, going through these renewals when it comes to your working life. And, maybe as well, certain jobs have came to a close, right? Certain positions where you just don't feel like there's a lot of life, or those places just don't align with your enthusiasm and your charisma, right? I think with you, Leo, you seek to feel something, right? To feel like, okay, yes, I have a purpose here, I have a meaning here, but also I'm doing the thing that I love, I'm doing the thing that I'm passionate about and that I really enjoy. But I think too, with Pluto being at that anaretic degree right now, with this feeling of urgency, maybe you can sense that, yes, a different way forward to do with work is on the horizons here. Maybe you've even been focusing and building so much here to do with work, and you have this sense of, okay, I've been responsible, I've been dedicated, rewards have happened, and there is some sort of foundation there, which can be very supportive. But I still can't help but think with Pluto, there is a part of it where you feel like, okay, I can see how this particular thing isn't really serving my soul anymore. Or maybe it's about a higher perspective, higher meaning, really aligning yourself then with these things. Maybe your priorities have really shifted and changed over these past 16 years, Leo. Or maybe even health has been a big focus. considering how the working stuff, the routine, habitual stuff, these areas have changed so much because you've got to think about your health. But let's consider here the beginning. Let's take you back to the start. So, Saturn was in your second house from 2008 until 2010. So, at the beginning of this transit, maybe you were trying to come to terms with, okay, well, what do I value? What do I want to build? What would I like to create within the world in a way where I'm really putting my skills to valuable use? Or maybe a big part of it was addressing how much you value competency and diligence and your organizational skills. Maybe that was really about getting to know, okay, well, this is how I structure my day, or this is how organized I can be, or how unorganized I can be. But still, that could have been a time period of this, aha, right, okay, this is how I want to improve. Then we move on to Saturn in your third house from 2010 until 2012. So, with the third house activated, perhaps for many of you, it was about, right, I need to focus on my education or my social skills here. If I want to be successful in life, if I want to get ahead in life, I need to socialize with others in a tactful, diplomatic way. Or maybe this was about seeing the ways in which you were blocked or limited within social situations. Maybe it was some sort of social anxiety that came up a great deal, or you recognized, oh, I actually feel quite shy here, or I'm just a bit more with going into myself here. So maybe there was some work or some effort, if you will, required from you there, or maybe it was a case of you meeting a certain person. It could have been a classmate, a friend, or a partner, and they could have pushed you in a way to speak up or to use your voice. It's like, no, let me help you through this, let me support you through this. Or perhaps this was more so about siblings and close relatives, and you having to be responsible or somewhat accountable for your actions there. Hey, another possibility is movement, right? Relocating, moving from a certain area to another, and then having to make new friends, and this sort of thing could have happened. Then we move on to 2012 to 2015, and Saturn was in the fourth. Now, this part of the transit could have actually been really very difficult for you. I'm just going to be very blunt when I say that. Emotional turmoil, well, inner turmoil, really. A lot of upset, perhaps, or feeling low, feeling really down. Possible depression, could have been a part of this for some Leos out there. Feeling stuck, feeling lost, hopeless, right? These feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, suffering in silence, possibly, or sort of going, oh my goodness, I can't trust anyone. I don't know how to open up. I don't know how to share. I don't know how to be vulnerable here. I feel like I'm just going through this on my own. Really heavy stuff, right? You could have fallen on pretty heavy times around that period of time. But another way to look at this, though, is that your family members were feeling this way, right? Maybe it's that you felt quite restricted emotionally. You didn't really gain as much emotional support because certain family members were sick, or they were just finding it difficult themselves. Maybe this also indicates some sort of loss or grief, or it could indicate moving house, right? Literally moving house. Even if you are Leo and you moved house recently, right, with that third house influence, that part of the transit could have been, oh well, I know we've moved, but we also have to move again because of a loss or because of a challenging situation. Whatever the case, it just seems as if your living situation or family matters were a bit more grim back then. But I also want to say that perhaps it was a case of you drawing from your own inner resilience and having to be really, really patient with yourself, or maybe certain family members acting as that resilient, patient force too. Just as another perspective and another way to look at that. Then we go to 2015 to 2018, and Saturn was in your fifth. I would say around that time, perhaps for many Leos out there, you felt really inspired, really excited, very much on fire, just passionate, right? Just passionate about your hobbies, your creativity, art, and the things that you wanted to create, right? It was just like, oh, yeah, I find this thing, or I feel inspired by this thing. I want to do it constantly, right? And you had that stamina, you had that endurance. Or this could be the commitment of a relationship. So, a romantic partner, a love connection there could have really started to form. And you went on so many adventures together and you felt aligned with them in terms of your own philosophies and your morals and your beliefs, etc. And perhaps even some of your aspirations were about, okay, what about children? What about the future? What do we want then together? Or perhaps even this could have more so been about just entertainment and enjoyment. And those things involved adventure and getting outdoors. Okay, so yes, it could have been quite the adventurous time back then. And possibly too, addressing your own confidence and your ego and your individuality. Individuality. Moving on to Saturn in the sixth. So we see here from 2018 to 2020, Saturn was in your sixth. And so, my goodness, you really got to work back then. I think that could have been where you truly lay the foundations for something quite long lasting to do with work, to do with your everyday routines. Or this could have been about you seeking some sort of mentorship or assistance to do with your mental health or just your health in general. Or another way to look at this is creating some sort of action plan when it came to fitness, when it came to diet, and just making those improvements to your life, addressing the stress levels, addressing your productivity levels, maybe being a bit more serious with yourself, a bit more disciplined with yourself, a bit more honest and realistic too. And the thing to further say is that the conjunction between Saturn and Pluto did occur in your sixth house January 2020. And so that actually ushered in a whole new cycle to do with health related matters, to do with your exercise and fitness levels and your diet, etc. Even coworker relationships, just your working life as well. These new cycles, or a new cycle to do with these areas. And this was it's a cycle of about 33 years or so. What I further want to say about that though is perhaps such matters brought a kind of renewal, a sort of shedding of old skin, a transformation where you thought, out with the old, in with the new. I'm not doing that anymore. You could have just given up a habit back then, just cold turkey. You might have given up smoking, for example, just like that. You might have given up some sort of unhealthy coping mechanism or a way that you consumed food, for example. So there are certain possibilities here, but yes, you could have went, no, not for me, I'm done. Maybe this was about a career change, a job change, right? Employment really transforming there for you around that time period. Then we go to 2020 to 2023. And Saturn was in the seventh house for you. So during that time period, it invited you taking responsibility within your relationships, especially thinking about more so your own strong views and your strong opinions, and maybe any lack of listening or hearing other people's perspectives. Or maybe this was about you addressing potential limitations and blockages regarding connection, regarding reaching out to others, to really sort of share in community, to share in a space. Maybe you even join some sort of group or club or a team situation where you were brought massively outside of your comfort zone, so to speak, because yes, there were those fears, there were those setbacks, but because you went for it, because you put yourself out there, you actually realize, oh, there are people like me, or they share similar values to me, and they want to relate to me. So that could have actually been quite a beneficial transit for helping you recognize that there are people who get you, who want to understand where you're coming from. But again, maybe a part of it too was having to really think about, why do I think this way? Why do I see it this way? How is this other person challenging me to see it a different way? Maybe even a significant relationship or a partnership started back then, and maybe that relationship was so unexpected, it was so surprising, but it's actually something that has been long lasting since that time. And you've really been growing and building together and maturing as well, truly maturing. And maybe a part of that too is to accept each other's differences and uniqueness. Then we come to today. And Leo, Saturn is in your 8th house. And quite honestly, to exit this transit, it does feel a bit intense or a bit emotionally draining. Maybe you can feel like there's a lot of pressure right now, a lot of pressure to perform, a lot of pressure to succeed, especially on that material level, right? The physical stuff to do with the 6th house. But perhaps a part of what Saturn in Pisces is here to offer you is that you can draw from the spiritual, you can draw from the emotional. If you need some time to yourself, some time in solitude, can you create space for that? Can you be disciplined about that? Or maybe this is a case of you paying back some sort of debts, or just making repayments so that you feel a bit more like, oh, I can breathe. Okay, to take the load off a bit, to take the pressure off a little bit. Or this could even be an intimacy matter, right? Addressing that emotional depth, that emotional connection there within your relationships, and just diving a little bit deeper and being a bit more honest about how you're feeling, or what you need, what you want, how you see things. And hey, this stuff could also be about shared resources, how you really share with another, and to be somewhat fluid and flexible and adaptable about these areas too, whilst also at the same time to be somewhat disciplined and to have set boundaries in place so that things can go a bit more smoothly. But overall here, Leo, we notice that the trajectory over the past 16 years or so has been about the ways in which you can transform practically, transform when it comes to the everyday stuff. And even, hey, when it comes to refining your skills and getting better, refining your craft, basically, refining your craft and improving upon your services. So we're now moving on to Virgo. Virgo, let's talk about these past 16 years. So Pluto has been transiting your 5th house, and what we see here is that the ways in which you show up romantically have changed substantially. I mean, you addressing your shadow, you addressing your unconscious habits, coming to terms with any obsessive tendencies, jealousy, coming to terms with any self-sabotaging, some self-destructive tendencies, how you might try to control or manipulate situations. Oh yeah, you have been showcasing so much integrity, and you've been very disciplined. You've been learning a lot actually about what it means to be a committed romantic partner, what it means to have a long-term relationship where there is honesty, there is truth, you're not keeping secrets from each other, but at the same time, recognizing that you can still have privacy, right? You can still have a private mind. And also, this is about the structure and the self-respect tied to your individuality, tied to confidence, your self-expression. Let's think here, Virgo. Is it that you're in spaces and situations and relationships where you feel like you can't be yourself? So, is it that you feel like you must put on a show or entertain others, be an audience for others, all whilst you feel a bit like, well, who am I? I want to express myself, but it feels like it's a bit of a power play. Do you feel heard? Do you feel seen? But most importantly, do you feel appreciated? Hmm. Does your ego, does your individuality feel appreciated? Feelings of specialness, right? We all have these feelings of specialness. Do you feel like you have that in your life? So I think Pluto in Capricorn over these past 16 years has indicated just the amount of transformations you went through here and the ways in which you have evolved. And a part of it too is your personal power, connecting with your personal power and how that shows up within romantic relationships, when it comes to expressing yourself, also when it comes to your creativity, how you create. So perhaps you have been learning many valuable lessons about creativity and passion and the things that excite you, the things that you have turned your passion into a business, or you have decided to really take things to the next level when it comes to romantic relationships. You know, been thinking about the future, but you've been very cautious and deliberate about each step, each move. But what I would like to do is I want to take you back to the start. So Saturn actually was in your sign at the beginning of all of this. So with Saturn in your sign in your first house, right? From 2008 until 2010, well, you had big aspirations, you had big dreams, you had big goals. You might have really set out back then with this sort of, do you know what? Yep, I'm ready to commit myself, to show dedication. I'm ready to really follow through with my studies and to get the grades or to make things happen. I'm ready to take responsibility of my life. I'm gonna succeed. Okay. Success may have been really pushed and really highlighted. Maybe you had these big expectations of yourself and you were quite serious about the path forward. Then we noticed that by 2010 until 2012, Saturn was in your second. And so this part of the transits, well, it could have highlighted some insecurities, some self-worth issues, some self-worth blockages and limitations there, especially if it was that you maybe entered a new relationship or things became a bit more serious, a bit more committed within a relationship there. Even if this was a relationship where you got close to a good friend, but basically it's almost like your relationships acted as a bit of a mirror, right? They sort of reflected back to you the ways in which you might have been deceiving yourself or feeling blocked within yourself. Even thinking about you putting more of the focus on other people or putting more of your value in the hands of other people. I mean, these are some serious lessons that you might even look back in retrospect and you go, oh, wow, I've really changed there. Oh, flip, that was a long time ago. That's an interesting thing to think about, really, as I'm going through these, right? You may hear these different time periods and then you go, oh, when I think back to that time period, I have really changed actually. So the other thing I want to say though is Saturn in your second house could have indicated this. Okay, what are my skills? What am I good at? What am I talented at? Oh, I'm maybe interested in music or art or something creative with Libra, some sort of design area, or maybe interest in socializing or law, diplomacy, counseling, mediating, whatever the case there, just some options. But basically, all of this is to say that time period could have indicated some sort of structure. This, okay, I'm going to commit myself to this. Let's build upon this. Let's make it happen. Then we come to, oh, and also just another thing, the financial side of things. Let's not forget that with the second house, finances may have been very much on your mind, right? Thinking about saving, budgeting, right? I'm going to save for this thing. I'm going to make sure that I have enough resources for this. A bit more dedication there during that time period. Moving on to 2012 to 2015. So 2012 to 2015. Saturn was in your third house. Well, this part of the transit could have brought up a lot of very heavy stuff within your immediate relationships. I'm talking about, yes, siblings, possibly cousins, but I'm also talking about spouses, grandparents, aunties, uncles, just people within your close environment. Could even be friends there, classmates, childhood friends could be under this. Peers, right? Your peer group could be under this. But all of this is to say that perhaps back then you felt like you couldn't really trust people, or you felt like you had to hide certain things from other people. Or maybe it's that there was some upset or there was some sort of power struggle, power plays, manipulative tactics that happened back then. Or, maybe it was that you relocated. You could have very well, relocated, changed schools, or you might have had different desires to do with education back then. And sure, yes, there could have been the power struggle stuff back then, but there could have also been a greater sense of, okay, well, when it comes to my studies, when it comes to communication, I am going to focus. I'm going to improve. I'm going to build here. I'm going to provide substance and quality here. So really improving indeed. Then we get to the fourth house, right? So from 2015 to 2018, Saturn was in your fourth. And so that part of the transit could have brought up a lot of restriction and uncertainty, perhaps, um, not knowing which way is which. When it came to your home life, your living situation, your family, maybe you really wanted freedom, you wanted to go on adventures, you wanted to travel, You wanted to do things outside of your comfort zone. You wanted to explore. I mean, whenever I draw from this and I reflect a bit, because I have a Virgo rising, the time period there of the Saturn in the fourth house, that was a time period where I traveled quite a bit. Also, I did travel quite a bit from 2012 till 2015. But yes, I would say with Saturn in Sagittarius, I did relocate quite often. And I just love that feeling of being free. I love that feeling of being able to explore. And it was such a good time where I grew in my knowledge and I just wanted to learn more. So you may relate there, Virgo, but even just to further say here, perhaps this was about you coming to terms with your beliefs, right? What do you believe? Asking yourself the bigger questions about life, about your meaning, about your purpose, your aspirations. Good time to really reflect on those areas, and perhaps you did. Then we come to 2018 to 2020, and Saturn was in your fifth. So maybe a committed relationship started back then, right? And at the same time, with there being the Pluto Saturn conjunction, January 2020, that conjunction could have ushered in a new 33-year cycle to do with out with the old, in with the new, right? I sort of look at this as you reaching a breaking point or reaching this point of no return where you go, I cannot deal with this anymore. I do not want this anymore. I want this to change. And so this stuff could have been linked to romantic relationships, lovers, dating, romance, or could have been connected even with your ego, your individuality, your confidence, wanting to maybe even feel a bit more alive, a bit more like you had greater control of yourself, or having to address any shadows, any blockages that kept you from really expressing yourself. So I'm not really saying this as a way to suggest that that particular conjunction was just a moment thing, a momentary thing. I think that such realizations and epiphanies are a part of a much bigger story, right? The 33-year cycle. So whenever I think about this for myself, just to give an example, maybe to help you with this, to understand it, but I can identify that around that time, I really took matters into my own hands to do with my own confidence. And so this has been nearly 5 years into this cycle. And I can see how I have changed and grown, but I also recognize that it's not just about a quick fix. This is a process, and it's perhaps a process that, I'm going to look back on and think, oh, wow, I've really changed, right? So I will be in my, what is it, my 50s, probably in my 50s by the time we come up to that period. So, yes, it's safe to say that I will have changed a lot. Though, to be fair, I think I will be closer to my 60s, but I digress. Another possibility here with Saturn in Capricorn, so thinking about 2018 to 2020, is, well, you might have really dedicated yourself to your creative projects, and you might have really wanted to be seen as a professional. Maybe you addressed some past mistakes, or you just took it upon yourself to be responsible, to even take some sort of responsibility, and to make sure that there was a solid foundation, right? Very much about that building a solid foundation with Saturn. Then we come to 2020 to 2023, and Saturn was in your sixth. So that part of the transit invited greater structure and stability and security tied in with your everyday routines, your everyday habits, getting rid of things that just no longer served you on a day-to-day basis, making a lot of cutbacks, being able to see, okay, I've experimented with this, I've tried this, okay, that does not work for me. Actually, this thing over here, it works a lot better. So I'm gonna continue to do that. Just the experimenting stuff to do with Aquarius, I feel really showed up for you within your everyday lives, thinking about the practical, the mundane. Perhaps even this indicated some sort of transition to do with your working lives, your services too, and just making things a bit more concrete, again, a bit more professional, and being mature, growing up, I think, growing up when it came to your services and your working lives. And as well, I would say making your health a big priority, okay? Considering your health and exercise and the routines that you have there, but also making sure that things were somewhat realistic and actually useful. And that may have required some experimentation to kind of get to that point where you may be at a point now where you feel a bit more level, so to speak, or like things work, they function better. But then we get to the last part, and also just to say, maybe creating some sort of form or structure within your working life in terms of colleagues and coworkers, feeling a sense of community, a tribe, connecting with coworkers and colleagues and collaborating, this sort of thing could have happened. Right, so we get to where we are today, and Saturn is in Pisces. It's opposing you, and so it may kind of feel like there's a lot of spiritual stuff happening for you, a lot of kick-ass spiritual stuff. What I mean by this is, sure, it could be feeling exhausted, tired, worn out, just done with certain things. But it could also be where it's almost like the universe, so to speak, God is shaking you and saying, wake up. This is the path. Follow your intuition. You know the right way forward for you. Align yourself with your moral compass, your moral guide here. And so it's an interesting one when we really look at this trajectory for you, because Saturn first entered your sign at the beginning of the transit, and it's went through these first 7 houses. Saturn will then continue through the other 5 houses there. So with that, I think the below the horizon houses being activated indicates how has very much been a personal journey. It's very much been this kind of, I want to say, self-development in a way, this developing yourself, improving, seeing what changes you can make so that you feel more aligned and healthy. And naturally, we want to bring it back to the 5th house and to think about how your trajectory overall has largely been about your individuality and your self-expression and confidence and what you radiate, really, how you light up the world, how you share of yourself, and even as well, just to consider what you've been creating over these past number of years. And another part of it too could be about children. It could be about wanting to establish some sort of security for your children, and maybe to make sure that you can provide for your children. Or this could also be about just being a bit more mature and responsible with respect to romance and love and what you're building there long term. But again, I think with Saturn in the 7th, it kind of speaks to responsibility being reflected back at you, but maybe in compassionate ways, in these emotionally honorable ways, where there is spiritual insight. There's a lot of intuition coming into this. And hey, it could even be that you take things to the next level within your relationships, right? This could be a marriage situation. This could be some sort of engagement. This could be even just feeling a greater sense of commitment with your significant other, with your partner. Perhaps it's even a new sort of role to do with business, to do with contracts and agreements. And so, especially with us being at the end of Pluto in Capricorn, you may feel this push right now. You may feel this calling to a new place, a new agreement. Okay, everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video here. So we're going to just keep this as Aries through to Virgo. And then in the next video, we will explore Libra through to Pisces. Thank you for your patience. If you've got your big three in Libra through to Pisces, I did not realize just how long this would take me, but here we are. And for those of you with that Aries through to Virgo, I hope that you have found your horoscopes to be beneficial. Though, to be fair, would I even call these horoscopes? I'm not sure. Maybe we could just look at it as a quick look into the past for self-development reasons or for self-reflection reasons. But overall, thank you all so much for listening. I really do hope that you find this information to be useful. And let me know if you relate. Please let me know your feedback, because this is a whole different fun method, I suppose, just a different style, and I wanted to explore things using Saturn as a part of it. If you would like to book a reading with me, you can visit my website, hannahselsewhere.com. And if you did enjoy your reading today, you can always buy me a coffee, but naturally there is no pressure with that. It's completely up to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you did like the video. And stay tuned for Libra through to Pisces. Bye.